The grand ballroom shimmered beneath the warm daylight pouring through towering crystal windows, where hundreds of wealthy guests gathered to celebrate the engagement of one of the city's most admired billionaires. Laughter echoed between marble pillars, expensive cameras flashed, and every table overflowed with elegant flowers and golden decorations. Everything looked perfect until one desperate scream shattered the celebration. A trembling maid rushed through the crowd with tears in her eyes, pointing toward the magnificent engagement cake before collapsing to her knees. The terrified woman cried that the cake had been poisoned and begged everyone to stop the ceremony before someone innocent died. Every conversation stopped. Every smile disappeared. The billionaire froze in disbelief while guests stared at the maid as if she had just destroyed the happiest day of his life. In only a few seconds, a celebration filled with joy transformed into a nightmare no one could have imagined. Before we continue this unforgettable story, if you believe kindness, truth, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe to the Kindness Legacy channel. Your support helps bring more inspiring stories to life. The maid's name was Mary's Vale, a quiet woman of 32 who had spent nearly 10 years working inside the luxurious Ashbourne estate. She had never been rich, never been powerful, and had never expected anyone important to notice her existence. Born into a struggling family in a small countryside town, Mary's learned early that honesty was often the only treasure poor people truly owned. She worked every day with dignity, cleaning rooms, preparing guest suites, and caring for the mansion as if it were her own home. While many servants dreamed of escaping their difficult lives, Mary simply hoped for peace, respect, and enough income to care for her elderly grandmother. Everyone on the staff trusted her because she never lied, never gossiped, and never searched for attention. The owner of the mansion, Callan Ashbourne, had built one of the country's largest technology companies from nothing. Although newspapers constantly described him as cold and untouchable, the people who worked closely with him knew another side of the billionaire. He quietly paid for employees' medical treatments, funded scholarships for workers' children, and anonymously donated to orphanages every year. After losing both parents in a tragic accident years earlier, Callan buried himself in work and rarely allowed anyone close enough to know his pain. When he announced his engagement to the beautiful socialite Serena Whitlock, the media celebrated what they called the wedding of the decade. Serena appeared graceful, generous, and sophisticated whenever cameras surrounded her. She smiled perfectly, spoke elegantly, and donated generously during charity events. Yet inside the mansion, many employees noticed something very different. She often insulted workers when nobody important was watching. She demanded impossible perfection, threw away expensive meals because they were slightly imperfect, and treated kindness as weakness. Most employees remained silent because they feared losing their jobs. Mary's, however, quietly observed everything without judging anyone. She simply believed that every action eventually revealed the true heart behind the beautiful face. On the morning of the engagement celebration, sunlight flooded the mansion's kitchens as dozens of chefs worked together preparing the enormous three-tiered cake that would become the centerpiece of the event. Mary's had been assigned to help decorate the dessert tables with fresh flowers. While carrying a tray through a hallway connected to the private kitchen, she accidentally witnessed something that immediately filled her with unease. Serena believed she was completely alone. She carefully looked around before removing a tiny glass bottle from her designer handbag and secretly pouring a clear liquid into one section of the cake. The movement lasted only seconds before she calmly placed the bottle away and walked out smiling as though nothing had happened. Mary stood frozen behind the doorway, unable to breathe. Her first instinct was to convince herself she had misunderstood what she had seen. Perhaps it had been harmless flavoring. Perhaps there was a reasonable explanation. Yet deep inside, fear whispered that something was terribly wrong. Instead of accusing anyone immediately, she quietly approached the cake after Serena left. A strange, bitter smell rose from the frosting. It was unlike vanilla, almond, or any ingredient used by the pastry chefs. Her hands trembled as she remembered stories her grandmother once told about dangerous chemicals used to kill farm animals. The scent felt frighteningly similar. The celebration began exactly at noon beneath brilliant blue skies. Wealthy investors, celebrities, politicians, and journalists filled every corner of the ballroom. Cameras focused on the smiling couple while musicians played beautiful melodies. The magnificent cake was rolled into the center of the hall, ready for the ceremonial first slice. Mary's watched from a distance, her heart pounding harder with every passing second. She knew that remaining silent could cost innocent lives. Speaking up could destroy her reputation forever if she happened to be wrong. Every servant nearby warned her with frightened eyes not to interfere. No poor maid would ever be believed over a glamorous billionaire's fiancé. As Callan reached for the silver cake knife, Mari suddenly ran forward without thinking about her own future. Her desperate warning echoed across the ballroom, stopping everyone in their tracks. Security guards immediately grabbed her arms, while horrified guests whispered that she had lost her mind. Serena burst into carefully practiced tears, pretending to be the victim of a jealous servant trying to ruin the happiest day of her life. Reporters eagerly pointed cameras toward the dramatic scene, while many guests demanded the maid be arrested immediately. Callan, despite his shock, noticed something unusual. Mary's was not begging for forgiveness or trying to escape. She kept looking only at the cake with genuine terror. Years of leading, a successful company had taught him that panic could be acted, but sincere fear was almost impossible to fake. Instead of ordering security to remove her, he instructed everyone to remain calm. The ballroom fell into heavy silence as he asked the head chef to stop serving the dessert. Within minutes, emergency medical specialists arrived carrying portable testing equipment because one of the guests happened to be a respected forensic toxicologist. Samples from different sections of the cake were carefully collected. The room became unbearably tense while hundreds of guests waited for answers. Serena confidently insisted that the maid had fabricated everything out of jealousy. She even demanded compensation for emotional damage. Her confidence remained unshaken until the test results appeared. The poison section contained a powerful substance capable of causing organ failure within hours. Shock swept through the ballroom like a storm. Several guests staggered backward, while others covered their mouths in horror. The atmosphere changed instantly from celebration to crime scene. Callan stared silently at the laboratory report, unable to accept that someone had truly planned murder in front of hundreds of witnesses. Investigators immediately reviewed security recordings from the mansion. Every hidden camera surrounding the kitchen clearly showed Serena secretly approaching the cake with the small bottle before leaving moments later. There was no misunderstanding anymore. The elegant mask she had worn for years shattered before everyone's eyes. As officers searched her belongings, they discovered financial documents revealing enormous gambling debts, secret payments from criminal associates, and forged agreements that would have transferred much of Callan's fortune into offshore accounts shortly after their marriage. The poisoning had been part of a larger plan to inherit everything while disguising the crime as a tragic accident. Guests who had admired Serena only moments earlier now looked at her with disbelief. The woman they believed represented beauty and elegance had hidden greed so deep that she was willing to sacrifice innocent lives for unimaginable wealth. Meanwhile, every eye slowly turned toward Mary's, whose courage had saved not only the billionaire but also every person who might have shared the poisoned dessert. Although newspapers praised Mary's as a national hero during the following weeks, her life did not instantly become perfect. She struggled with overwhelming attention, painful memories, and the guilt of wondering whether she could have stopped Serena sooner. Fame felt uncomfortable to someone who had always lived quietly. She even considered resigning because she feared people would think she had exposed Serena simply to become famous. Callan understood her discomfort better than anyone expected. Instead of offering expensive gifts or publicity, he thanked her with simple sincerity. He established an educational foundation in Mary's grandmother's name to help hardworking domestic employees receive scholarships, financial assistance, and legal protection. For the first time, countless invisible workers felt seen and respected. Mary's accepted a leadership position within the foundation, determined to ensure that honesty would never again be ignored simply because it came from someone wearing a servant's uniform. Months later, the mansion looked different. The grand halls remained luxurious, but warmth had replaced fear. Employees smiled freely. Managers listened more carefully. Callan himself became more present among the staff, realizing that true leadership meant valuing every person regardless of status. He often remembered how the wealthiest guests in the ballroom had remained silent while the poorest woman had possessed the courage to save everyone. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like, share, and leave a comment below. Your support encourages us to continue bringing emotional stories filled with hope, courage, and humanity here on Kindness Legacy. Special request, please comment with the word truth if you believe honesty is always more powerful than wealth. Years passed, but people never forgot the extraordinary afternoon when a humble maid risked everything to protect strangers who barely knew her name. Schools invited Maurice to speak about courage. Young workers found confidence in her example. Families remembered that character cannot be measured by expensive clothes, powerful titles, or enormous bank accounts. It is revealed during the difficult moments when doing the right thing carries the greatest personal cost. Callan never described Maurice as the woman who saved his fortune. Instead, he always introduced her as the woman who saved his faith in humanity. And every time sunlight filled the ballroom where the terrifying event had unfolded, it reminded everyone that even in places overflowing with wealth, the brightest light often comes from the humblest heart. The celebration that nearly ended in tragedy became a timeless reminder that truth may arrive wearing a simple uniform. But its courage is powerful enough to expose even the darkest deception and inspire generations to choose integrity over fear.